okay, pre-engineering. What are we doing to get ready for all of this?
Well,
And
it
this
was,
is where,
sorry, on that last, I was going to point out, like, yet even if you go back real quick, even another, so I've got Adobe Creative Cloud here, yet another data silo. So if you have some design work that happens, you might have, marketing slicks that you put out or presentations that are done outside of an Autodesk environment. So yet you've got a third data silo now where the data doesn't sit where it's supposed to. So there's got to be there's a better solution, right, than potentially having it all put together. But how do you get it all to work in conjunction where it doesn't impact your business?
yeah. So maybe before we talk about pre-engineering, what to do to get ready, um, I'll just open it up for Q&A to start. I know, thanks, Jack, for answer or asking that question a little earlier. The things I'll kickstart it. The thing I always ask is, okay, we've done this fancy presentation, we've talked about all these things. What's like the one thing you want people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. So the biggest thing when you're looking at migration, whether it be from an existing server or an existing cloud platform like SharePoint that Jack is asking about, is understanding what you want it to look like when it gets there and what you want it, how you want it to function. Spend a lot of time in pre-engineering. It is very, very important because it'll dictate how your system's going to function once everything happens. Like so, we've fixed quite a few where people have just done, moved all their data to SharePoint on a whim, and you get there, the permissions are off, the functionality is wrong, the folder structure is messed up, and so it's just not they're not set up for success. And then ultimately, you see basically an attrition from staff. They just stop using some of those technologies and they just start putting it back on their desktop. And then at that point, that creates problems because if the desktop blows up, then you've got data that's missing.
So it's kind of like understand why you're doing it. What are the business reasons for doing it? And spend a lot of time in pre-engineering so you're not stepping over yourself when you actually go to execute it. Um, and the first thing you guys are talking about is check your current licensing. How does it set up?
Yeah, what is
Does
it going
it
to
match
pay?
what you're after? That kind of talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna? What's going to cost, right? So is this are you is it a showstopper before you even get there? Is it too expensive? Do you have to license everyone in your staff, or are you already paying for some of it? We call that the sanity check, right? So are the numbers going to pencil out once everything's said and done? Yeah. So yeah, folder structure, naming conventions, really big thing. Um, this is a good opportunity if you're going to make the move to start looking at not what you necessarily have today, but what you want to look like tomorrow. We take this opportunity when we're doing the project to get input from the stakeholders of like, hey, your structure might be messy, right? This is a great time to clean it up because we're gonna have to move everything the way it is now. Sure, we can forklift it, but chances are it's not going to work the way you want it to.
Yeah. It's kind of like I always use the building analogy, right? Are we remodeling the home or are we building a new home?
Correct.
And basically, in this scenario, you're saying, look, engineer, architect the home, design it, draw it up, however you want to say it, like you want it, because this is your new custom home.
Well, and there's some gotchas in there too. And like SharePoint has limitations. It has character length limitations. It has file count limitations. It has a lot of data limitations. And so hopefully I don't get struck down by the Microsoft lightning bolt, for saying these things. But it's true, right? So if you're looking at a cascading, so you have like a folder structure that's you have all your clients and under there you have all these cascading folders, and so you might have potentially 25 different folders under your root folder. You may actually run out of character space to actually have the proper names on your files. Like we've seen files that is like the entire address of a client, and you think about like you have 255 characters available in the whole naming path, and 30 of them are taken up by just the name of the file. And so all of a
Uh,
sudden things break. And so going through that engineering process to really understand, if I try to move this, is it going to work when it gets there? And so we've seen that happen a lot of times where people's kind of run up against a wall and they're like, I moved everything on my own and it doesn't work. And so we go through and have to do an analyze why things are broken in the first place. But it's really important just to figure out all the gotchas of, and understand the limitations of the structures themselves.
well, I love it because, we're in this self-serve world, right? Everything we do on our phone is like, oh, I can set that up. And oh, it's just technology. It's just files.
You got an
I'm
easy
gonna buy the
button.
license, turn it on, and move some files over. We're
Yeah,
done.
you got that big easy button
That's
right
the way
here.
everybody thinks. It's kind of like the building videos, if you ever watch them, and it makes it look like you can build a house in a couple of hours. And there's no substitute for professional people like you guys who understand these little nuances. Um, there's just a few more things that are, you know, the one that you talk about gotchas. Well, these aren't the only uh, systems in use, right? There may be need to grab data or integrate from other systems.
Well, and that's the key that I was alluding to earlier, is that with the integrations, now you're potentially able to get yourself out of that silo. And so how do you
Oh,
what do you integrate with? How do you integrate it? What sort of functionality will that integration bring you? And so now that you have data potentially in different locations, if you have these integrations, some are fully developed integrations, some are APIs, that you're able to program the interfaces between the two different companies,
right,
and be able to move data back and forth. So that's how you start getting over these two different areas of how data sits and how it's dealt with.
right. I'm sensing a phased approach. Well, pre-engineering, you're talking about pre-engineering, thinking through all the things on paper or, before they ever happen to make sure it goes well. Kind of like engineering a building or architecting a building.
Yep, you want to have a very solid foundation before you start building something up.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So,
on that, Tony, on that, sorry, before you move on.
yeah.
So one of the things, so we're talking about pre-planning, right, which takes time and thought. And one of the trends we're seeing emerging is over the last 6 months, specifically with Microsoft SharePoint system, is we're finding that customers who have CAD files in that, who've been working great for years, are starting to have issues. And so we are seeing some hot buttons, some hot spots popping up with customers who all of a sudden SharePoint just stops working the way it's supposed to, or it changes. I can tell you we're not getting any information from Microsoft or Autodesk that says they changed something, but something has changed. And so what we have to make the assumption is that these Microsoft and their 365 strategy and Autodesk and their Autodesk Docs or their cloud strategy, they're not talking to each other, right? Like they're on separate paths that just happen to be parallel at the moment. And a customer is like, straddling one and the other, like, oh, we're doing good. And then this one shifts over this way or this one shifts that way. So now we have customers that their legs are getting stretched very far and they're getting very uncomfortable with it. And it's becoming an impact to them. So we like right now we're like either wrapping up or in discussions with several customers about, what do we move to, what do we do, what are the next steps, and why did this break like 3 months ago or 6 months ago? And we're like, I don't know why it broke, but I can guarantee you the two systems weren't designed to work together. So we have had officially, Microsoft has given us documentation that states that they don't think Autodesk files or AutoCAD files specifically can work in Microsoft 365 because of how they have to lock, and that with that collision and all of that. So it's, although pre-engineering takes time, there is some urgency. But I would say for those who are not having issues, and it's mostly cloud solutions. People on servers, they're just plodding along like they normally would be, but they're just stuck in their office too. So there's pros and cons for each thing.
Right, right. Well, it's good you guys keep an eye on that kind of information. out there so you can be informed. It's like when Google makes changes online, they don't need to tell anybody. They try to after the fact. We go, oh,
Sorry.
sorry about that. We rolled over in the middle of the night and crushed, 10 million businesses or whatever. But it's that, I guess that's what keeps the world working, I guess.
And like I say, the key is knowing your functionality, and your functionality will determine your platform. And so that, like I said, we've been talking about a lot about Autodesk Docs, but there are potentially other platforms that data can reside in. And then you use integrations to click over to Autodesk Docs and integrate into 365 and other platforms. So there is the best of both worlds. Well, how about this? There's never the best of both worlds, but you can definitely start bringing in the gap by utilizing different sets of tools. So with that, if you have those questions, I'm not going to give it to you on the call because